Hello, everyone. Welcome to our fourth monthly Lake Org Chat. As an outreach program of the College of Natural Resources at UW-Stevens Point, our goal is to provide educational resources and support to the broader community in regard to lake health. As you may know, Wisconsin is home to over 15,000 lakes, and over 750 of these lakes have an organization that protects and manages the health of the lake for current and future generations. We try to get important and timely information out to you in a variety of ways, and this year we are recording these monthly Lake Org chats to get this information out to you in a hopefully engaging way. Please let us know how we're doing by completing the feedback survey linked on YouTube. And we hope you'll join us for future episodes. Tentative topics are listed here. In this episode, we'll be discussing the importance of budgets and how to align your budget with your organization's purpose. My name is Sarah Winju, and I'm the Leadership and Capacity Development Specialist for the Extension Lakes program at UW-Stevens Point, and I'll be helping to facilitate these chats each month.
And I'm Eric Olson. I'm the Director of Extension Lakes here in Stevens Point, and I'm also just participating in these chats. And I'm pleased to introduce our guest today, Stephanie Prowitz. Please introduce yourself.
Absolutely. I'm the Executive Director of the Green Lake Association. I've been there for 13 years. I'm happy to be a part of today's conversation.
Great.
We're excited to have you with us, Stephanie. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, of course.
So, like I said, we are talking today big picture, discussing the connections between the money you spend in your organization and the programs that you're operating or how you're functioning as an organization, and how what you're spending what your program is doing, what your organization is doing can influence the money that you raise in the future. We will also touch on the importance of the importance of developing a budget, but also how often you look at the budget and review the budget, and how important that is to in how your organization functions. Anything else you both want to say before we jump into some of the details?
Well, on the next slide, you'll see that we're talking about kind of two different audiences in Wisconsin. We have our lake associations, which are nonprofit organizations that are set up just to work on lake-related issues. And then we also have lake districts in Wisconsin, and these are local units of government. And because they're local units of government, they have sort of different responsibilities as far as thinking through their budgets and having documents that are actually publicly available for people to look at. And in Wisconsin, lake districts, a lot of times people form those groups because they want some more predictability around budgeting, and they want maybe a way to get everybody to participate together through taxes and fees that are compulsory in nature. Comparing that to lake associations, which we're going to hear from today with Stephanie, they sometimes have more variable budgets, and things can kind of go up and down from year to year. In both of these cases, though, lake groups need to show value of what they're doing. They need to somehow convey, whether it's to the taxpayers or whether it's to members, that they're good stewards of those resources, that money, and that they're putting it towards the things that they say they're doing. So in a nutshell, on the next slide, are they putting their money where their mouth is? So we're really hoping to kind of highlight a good case study. We've heard about Green Lake Association, Sarah and I, over time, and we've heard about how they've evolved as an organization and how they've really have tried to focus on putting their money where their mouth is. And what we hope to hear from Stephanie in today's story is just sort of an example that you all can learn from and take some ideas back to your organization. Again, whether it's a lake district or an association, matching up kind of what you spend your money on to what your purpose is and what your mission is, that's a key way to actually build trust and support. So once again, back to Stephanie. I just want to introduce her. She's bravely presented this at our Lakes and Rivers Convention in 2025 to our audiences. And we thought, hey, let's share that story once again, and let's talk about how this feeds into their budget. So I'm going to hand the mic over to her.
Thank you, Eric and Sarah. Happy to be a part of today's conversation. I think sometimes when we talk about budgets, it can feel like this big abstract conversation. And so I wanted to choose one example of the moment, I think, when we started to really shift our budget toward thinking about our strategic goals and our mission. And so that example is found in the Osprey. Next slide. So going back about 13 years, this is when I was just beginning at the Green Lake Association. And we are one of the few, lake associations that have staff, but then we were much smaller. So two part-time staff. And one of our big early projects was this osprey camera. We were so excited that there was an osprey nest, and people were putting poles around, and this was before, the live feeds were really easy to do. But we thought we need to build from scratch this live feed of an osprey nest. And so the community really rallied around it, and they loved it. We were always getting feedback on, a chick hatched. Oh my gosh, it just caught a lake trout. Tune in. And so it was nice to have this really direct conversation with our members. Lots of intention, lots of engagement. But I think I started to realize that something didn't seem right, because this was taking up a lot of our time and our money. This camera was always breaking down, and we'd have to drop everything and put out the fire. So this was the moment that I realized we weren't really moving the needle on what mattered. So a well-loved project, but not a purposeful one. Next slide. So back then, again, many kind of disconnected programs, a mismatch between we're really busy, but what are we actually getting done? And those were some of the questions of what are we accomplishing? And I think that these types of questions are the basis of how you start to develop a budget. Next slide. The truth here is that just because something is popular doesn't mean that it is aligned with your mission or is purposeful. This program, this Osprey camera, I think taught us a hard but valuable lesson, which is just because something grabs attention doesn't mean that it deserves your resources. So if you want to make a real impact, you have to kind of be brave and ask questions like, is this actually helping us achieve our mission? We often say that, effort doesn't equal outcome. We're working hard, we have good intentions, but if you don't have focus, you're a hamster on a wheel, working really hard, not going anywhere. Next slide. For us, that wake-up call happened shortly after I began at the Green Lake Association, when Green Lake was listed as impaired for a dissolved oxygen issue caused by phosphorus. And we knew that the lake had water quality challenges, but to have that formal designation was really kind of scary. It felt like this huge thing. We didn't know what to do. And we had a lot of conversations with the board at that time where we realized that we needed a rallying cry. And for us, that rallying cry was a singular focus on water quality. And I think for lake associations that we can get pulled in a lot of different ways: noise pollution, sound pollution, safety and navigation, the list goes on and on. And so there are some projects that we don't get involved in. We call it the art of the handoff. Oh, you're worried about this, maybe you should talk to this other organization. Just because it involves a component of lake life doesn't mean that we have the capacity to get involved. Next slide.
Well, I want to ask real quick. Oh, and maybe Eric does too, but
Yes.
I think a lot of times lake organizations have these, oh my goodness, this is happening. Oh no, we found a new invasive species in the lake. Oh my gosh, this is happening now. And there might be one, there might be multiple happening at the same time. So I mean, I think this is, it's good to think about. And also we don't have maybe the answer right now, but just how do you, if there's multiple, how do you, if you have limited staff, limited time, or limited people, volunteers, how do you know which of these wake up calls or issues do you focus on first versus waiting? And that can be overwhelming, but it is something that, something to think about. Go ahead, Eric, if you were.
Well, and my point too, some context for this. If people aren't familiar with Big Green Lake in Green Lake County, it's a very large lake. It's a very deep lake. And historically, it was a very clear lake. It was believed to be, one amongst the clearest lakes in Wisconsin. And people have this history or this memory of like, oh yeah, I remember we could go out there and people would scuba dive along the cliffs underwater. And so becoming listed as an impaired water body, that probably, like you said, that struck people as like, whoa, what is going on here? We're over here talking about birds of prey, but right behind us, we've got severe water quality issues.
That's exactly it. And I think those wake up calls are a really important time to take a minute, pause, kind of get galvanized. How do you make those decisions? You have to have, again, that rallying cry. You have to have a clear mission. You have to have, for us, we've revisited our mission. So our mission is now to safeguard Green Lake by improving its water quality, protecting it from critical threats, and accelerating its return to a clean lake. If it doesn't accomplish those things, then it's not, it's hard to say, sort of doesn't demand our attention. I heard once that every nonprofit's job is to put themselves out of business, right? Like we are working toward that reality where that future state that we want is now solved. But that takes a lot of time, and it takes discipline. And for us, not only is it the mission that helps us, and as you see here, that I think people think, oh, to be so focused is where's the excitement in that? But in fact, having that focus allows you to be, it is liberating to, it's not just about saying no to things that you love. It's about being able to have the resources to say yes to what matters. And that clarity, it brought clarity to our team. It brought confidence to our board. And it also brought, I think, education to our members to understand where we do and don't get involved. And again, it's about also having good partnerships to be able to say, this thing has come up. It's really important. It's important to our lake. We can't do it, but who among our partners, is there a better fit out there? So often when we work on lakes, this is a public body of water. The Green Lake Association doesn't own it. So those partnerships of people working on behalf of the lake are really important as well. So you're not in it alone. And sometimes you have to look left and right to see maybe who needs to pick up that ball if it's not you.
As we transition to the next slide, this is kind of where I feel like your organization, the Green Lake Association, translated that focus to not only the budget, but sort of like, where's this money going to come from and how are we going to fundraise? How can we actually generate the revenue needed? Because this isn't a small challenge, right? This isn't a simple task. This is something that's complex. It's going to take years to get done. But if you don't try, if you don't put forward the effort, you're never going to get there. So tell us a story about sort of how you used to fundraise and then how things changed.
I'm happy to. I think every lake association, a lot of nonprofits have the event where you invite people to come, and it's a fundraiser. And so for us, this was the annual gala. And you can see here, this woman is putting tickets into a bucket raffle. And we also had live auctions, and we had a silent auction, lots of currencies of giving, lots of fun activity happening. But we got to the point that we had something like 75 silent auction items. And if you've ever had the great misfortune of being in charge of that, you know that it's a lot of administrative work to organize them, to arrange them, to track them, to get the sheet, to get the sign, to put it in the program. And at some point, I realized that we kind of intuitively know, if you're spending rather a really coveted, beautiful weekend day on your lake to instead go to a fundraiser, you're signaling that you care about that mission, you care about that work. But I know how much, if you want to go to the next slide, I intuitively know how much that cheese basket is. And at some point I thought, it goes against human nature to intentionally overpay for something. I'm here because I care. Tell me about what you're doing. The fundraising model that we were using felt really transactional, and it didn't do any justice to what was at the heart of our work. And so it felt scary at the time, but I went to the gala committee and eventually to the board, because this was a strategic, this had financial implications. I said, what if we scrapped the cheese baskets and we instead gave people a chance to fund real, meaningful projects? But in order to do that, we had to tell our stories. So next slide. That was the origin, the birth of our pillar projects. We got rid of the silent auction, and instead we had a pillar project auction. Pillar projects for us had 3 distinct buckets: Project Clean Streams, Project Green Acres, and Project Invader Defense, and it allowed us to work on things like stream and wetland restoration, our partnerships with the agricultural community, as well as dealing with invasive species in the lake. So we're going to talk about it more, but getting rid of the auction items and instead focusing on pillar projects was, again, as I think about sort of these moments of, the Osprey camera or the pillar project or the gala silent auction and then pillar projects, distinct moments that informed a new way of organizational capacity for us.
And I can make a connection here too, some context. The invader defense, you've got a picture here of carp basically, and a barrier in the background. Carp is really just 1 degree of separation from your goal of water quality. It's not like you're controlling carp because people are mad at carp or they think that they're bad fish. The problem was that the carp are disturbing sediment and resuspending nutrients and feeding into your water quality problems. And so you're focusing on them not because they're invaders, but because it's a water quality connection. And the same thing with the green acres. Like, you're working with the watershed and farmers because what happens on that landscape is also going to directly impact water quality.
And just a clarifying question, does that one specifically include other invasive species?
It does. So this is where Project Invader Defense included our Clean Boats, Clean Waters match, or annual removal of carp. And as Eric said, not because carp are annoying, but because they spawn in shallow areas that, disrupt a wetland that should be filtering nutrients for water quality. Those are some of the first top of mind. As we grew, we also helped create a boat wash station, for example. So not just, but people on Green Lake hate these carp. So it was our mascot for that one.
And another clarifying question. You chose 3 pillar projects, but because those are all 3 of them are of equal importance to your mission of better water quality, but other organizations, this 3 isn't some magic number. Someone, another organization could have just one focus like this. We're only going to focus on one of these. Is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. I mean, 3 is a nice round number and I can remember 3, but we had a singular focus on water quality. So we could have in some ways just gone for that. It's going to be different to every organization. And it took us time to get to these. We had to think about the theme of our work. What could we actually get done? If you want to go to the next slide, we had to have conversations about what were our priorities. Okay, if it's not the Osprey camera, what are we willing to commit to? Not just dollars spent, but if you're a board, what projects are you willing to? You're putting your credibility on the line. In some ways, when you're communicating to the public that these are our pillar projects, then you have to be willing to put effort toward it to make an impact. And if you don't, that again, that's your kind of your lake association's credibility. So it's a big conversation. When we put those pillar projects together, we also had to ask, well, what are we willing to do? And then how much is that going to cost? You may have to think about staff time. The other thing I wanted to mention here is that this is the power of having board members who kind of ask questions and probe and prod, because we had a board member who worked in hospital administration, and he said, hold on, you're going to ask people for money for these projects, and so you are getting donor restricted dollars. It's something I hadn't thought about before, but rather than a year-end appeal or your membership funds, if you're saying give us money for stream restoration, then you need to track the dollars that went in, and then you need to track the dollars that went out for stream restoration. You can't say, give us money for stream restoration, and then later you say, you know what, that was a good idea at the time, but instead we're going to renovate the office. So you have to, there's that from kind of an accounting perspective, I want people to know that when you embrace this, there is some behind the scenes accounting that you need to be willing to take on. So that the credibility isn't just to the public, but there's this governance component as well.
And I think what you were able to do then is translate your goals into sort of aspirational dollar amounts of like, well, if we want to get this much done, it's going to require this much money. And the executive directors doesn't just snap their finger and that money materializes. You need to go out and raise that money, right? So tell us about how that translated to your fund, to the event itself.
So great. So next slide. At the event, and you didn't go into the room and see tables of silent auctions. Instead, when you walked into the room, hanging from the ceiling, we had these three gigantic banners hanging down. Project Clean Streams, Project Green Acres, Project Invader Defense. This is our goal for tonight. And then even under those we were in a big showroom for a boat. So we had a lot of space to fill. Under there, we had tables with signage like this. Every $250 you give allows us to say adios to 933 carp. We had to calculate, well, how many carp have we caught in the past and how much was that? So what's the dollar per carp? Yeah, I don't have the math in front of me, but remove 196,000 pounds of carp was tied to a fundraising goal for that pillar project that was communicated to the public. So it seems like a really simple calculation, but there's actually a lot of work, especially if you're not organized, that goes into translating those dollars and into distinct causes. So it was it's a calculation you have to be organized for and then communicate it. So next, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
At the event itself, you weren't just gathering $250 a pop from people, right? You did sort of a unique style of auction.
Exactly. So I think we're familiar with a live auction where you're bidding on one thing and, you want the stand-up paddleboard. And so people are raising their hand and the amount is getting bigger and bigger as you go along, but there's only one stand-up paddleboard. So there's a winner at the end. What we used instead was something called the reverse auction idea. And I can sell as many pledges as I want here. So it's infinite opportunities. And instead of starting at the low end, you start at the high end. Who is willing to give me $1,000 for Project Invader Defense? And then multiple people are raising their hands. We had volunteers around the room that would kind of run up to those folks, get their bidder number or their name and the amount that they pledged. And then we would track that, and people could either pay at the end of the night, or we would even invoice them if they, we at the checkout table, if they hadn't paid at the end of the night, it gave us a means to follow up with them. So that was the reverse auction item. We also wanted to make sure that when the auctioneer stood up and said, who's willing to give me $5,000 for this pillar project, we wanted moments of drama to get people really into the moment and inspire them. One that comes to mind is we certainly talked to people ahead of time to say, when the auctioneer says this, I know you've had a history of giving to the auction, the gala. Could you could you wait till this moment to raise your paddle? And people were really supportive of that. And then the auctioneer, ahead of time, we planned this, who's willing to give me $10,000 toward Project Clean Streams? And our board president at the time stood up and he said $20,000, and the room gasped, and it was this exciting moment. But I think it's fun to kind of play with those moments of drama to build excitement, enthusiasm toward your mission. So I would encourage people to think about that as well.
Well, how did it work out?
Well, it worked out very well. So skipping ahead a couple of slides, that clarity really inspired generosity, but let me show you some graphs. So in the early days of the silent auction item, we were getting like $10,000 to $15,000 from the silent auction. And after we introduced the pillar projects, we added a zero basically to what we were raising. It was completely incredible. And I realized that if we wanted to be better, we had to become really good storytellers, not only being organized behind the scenes, but to describe the future state of what, and with people support, what they could make possible. People don't want a cheese basket. They want to support work that they believe in, that enough that they were willing to give a night to show up and bring some friends to. So I am now every believer in telling stories, and as a fundraising mechanism. And even in COVID in 2020, when we were online, that still resonated with them, that they were willing to give to the pillar projects.
Awesome.
So next slide, what I found is that when you get more funds, this is a picture of Joelle and Madden at one of our events, our live auction item. When you raise more funds, you can do more projects. When you do more projects, you get a track record, you have more progress. So that next time when you come to your donors, you're not starting from scratch. You have credibility, and you said, this is what we did with your funds before. Now can you help us do this new thing? And you can raise more funds. So it's this really nice capacity building exercise that takes time. You don't snap your fingers. This didn't happen for us if you go back to that graph, in some ways it did happen in 1 year, right? But you have to spend the dollars to get more dollars. And in order to do that, it goes back to this. So you have to budget for it. So you have to be organized behind the scenes on what's the revenue flowing in, what are the expenditures flowing out of your organization, and then how do you communicate that impact to your members? And one thing I wanted to point out, if you go to the next slide, is so that pillar project model worked so well for us that we realized we wanted to structure our entire organization around pillars. We do more than, clean streams, green acres, invader defense. We do things like data collection, and we activate the community. And so we switched from pillar projects to program pillars to be more all-encompassing of everything that we do. So we work on phosphorus reduction, whether that's working with farmers or stream restoration or things like that. AIS prevention, that's like the invader defense. Clean boats, clean waters, our boat wash station. Data evaluation, we work with the sanitary district, the Green Lake Sanitary District, as well as USGS to do stream monitoring. All of our research projects that are helping inform our strategic plan are under here. Under community activation, all of our education and outreach and volunteering and governance, all of advocacy is under this. And then certainly, I think sometimes we shy away from this, but it takes resources to support the organization. It is our critical infrastructure. And so, what we give towards staff to pay rent, right? Whatever that is, mileage to drive to and from a meeting. These are, we shouldn't shy away from having to fund some of these more logistics components as well. And so that's under critical infrastructure. So these are now our program pillars. And I wanted to talk quickly about how we use them. So going to an Osprey camera, to a burned out silent auction committee, to pillar projects, it was the transformation of our organization. And we started from, for example, 2 part-time people. Now we're able to, because we've taken on bigger projects, we're able to grow our staff to do more work. But the program pillars are the entire foundation. We have a strategic plan. Our strategic plan has 5 goals associated with those 5 program pillars. Every board meeting, we write a staff report. And we don't just say, here's what we did in some random way. We organize them around those 5 goals of the strategic plan, which are around those 5 program pillars. If you get our impact report, that's our annual report. You gave us this money, members, here's what we did. Here's how we spent those dollars. And even for the first time ever, we were founded in 1951, above and beyond membership dues and grants. we're starting our first ever major gift campaign, and that major gift campaign has 5 pillars associated with it. So it has become this incredible organizational tool, and it was about focus, and it was about investing and translating that into a story of kind of what could be, but we needed our member and donor support to do that. So budgeting is a huge part of that. So this framework has been, again, I think I've hit this dead horse here, but it's been important not just to organize our team, but also with our board. I want to say also that the board plays such an important role here. It was that I went to a board member and I said, I'm thinking about scrapping the silent auctions and I want to organize them into these 3 buckets. And this board member had a marketing background and he said, you should call them pillar projects. And then we thought about what were those buckets. And then he was the one to suggest the names, for example. It was a board member who said, we need to focus if the lake is impaired, we need to focus our work. We're doing too much. We're just, again, we're that hamster on the wheel. What are we actually doing? So I want to put a pitch out there for people who serve on lake association boards. There's such an important role that you play to kind of push and question and prod and bring up your experience. You're on that board because of your experience, so bring it to the table.
I think you bring up a good point too of maybe organizations who don't know maybe the skills that they have access to around their lake. There might be one of these people just there waiting to be brought in to to serve the lake on the board. They just may never have been asked or never been approached in the right way. So, putting out instead of asking for, and I mean, this is not related to budget specifically, but it all ties together, is instead of saying we need 2 board members this year, or we're looking for people to fill these seats, being more specific and strategic of we are looking for someone who has experience doing this or that has these specific skills. Someone might be then understand, oh, I could be valuable.
That's me.
I have those skills.
Right.
Yes. And I am ready to do this. So yes, good point. And I think those people do exist. A lot of them.
I agree, sir. And I think it's even easier to recruit people onto a board when you can map this all out for them and explain, like, these are our goals. This is exactly what we're trying to do. This is the budget that's associated with those goals. And we want you to be part of a leadership team, part of the board. If you didn't have those documents, if you had like a really badly presented budget and it wasn't clear what your goals were and how they relate back to the budget, then people are like, why would I want to be a part of this? It seems like you all have some work to do before I want to get involved. But people do get drawn into organizations. It's sort of like your diagram earlier of how success begets further success. I think that works with the board too. When people see that the board is functioning and they're getting things done, then they want to participate as well.
Yeah, so many good points there. Often when we ask people to join the board, what do they ask? What's the one of the first questions they ask? Well, who else is on the board? If I'm able to say, well, you would have, this person and that person, it demonstrates that, well, if this person is willing to donate their time, volunteer in this way, then it establishes some credibility. And then on the back end, Sarah, to your point, we have something called a gap analysis where are the gaps in our board, or where are we a little thin, we need more people. And then we even have a list on the back end of who are the people that we know that might have those skill sets. So it's not just about who wants to volunteer, but your board, when they go to cocktail parties and their friends and their neighbors, they know we're a little bit, we need more expertise on the board as it relates to attorneys. Or maybe because you've raised money for this, you're going to really make a big push over the next couple of years in some really water quality heavy projects. Then maybe you need to ask, well, is there anyone with a chemistry background or science or restoration? So even planning ahead to the big projects you're scaling up for, don't forget that you may need to scale up and board members in a specific area as well. So last couple of points here, if you want to go to the next one, when I think back to our organizational transformation, where we were really busy but not impactful, running around, trying to get stuff done, when we had a really clear galvanizing framework. It informed our budget. And it allowed us, and remember, time is money. So for us with staff, having people spend their time on a project is money as well. It's not just about the third-party vendor you're writing checks to. When we were able to direct our organizational, the money that we have raised toward projects, we've been able to take on more exciting things. So we went from an osprey to being able to restore a brook trout species, which is an indicator of clean water, by the way. We worked on a restoration project because that stream erosion was contributing to water quality issues. We were able to get DNR grants. We even got a grant from Patagonia. We were able to take care of some erosion issues. We were able to lower a perched culvert and this is where it's interesting. We were interested in this project because of the water quality issues. We lowered that perched culvert that was contributing to erosion. But at some point the DNR said, you guys are doing enough. We're going to restock brook trout. Those brook trout hadn't been in Dakin Creek, though it was a trout stream. They'd been missing for 75 years. The DNR restocked the brook trout, and those brook trout were healthy and happy enough in that cleaner water quality stream that they started to naturally reproduce. And so that's the picture you're seeing here, this little baby brook trout of one that had reproduced in Dakin Creek. That took a lot of organizational capacity to build toward, and you don't get there by spinning your wheels. You get there with a clear focus, demonstrated impact, discipline on budgeting, and then you're able to have these really exciting milestones that you often don't get in the world of water quality, because you're not going to remove your lake from the impaired waters list overnight. So you have to look for those wins along the way. And so to me, the budgeting part is a part of it. So final slide before our discussion is I encourage people to think about, where are you putting a lot of effort that's maybe not aligned with your mission, and how can you kind of revisit that even on programs that are maybe much loved and popular? Is it helping you grow toward that greater purpose? And if not, I would ask people to have those really tough conversations, to revisit them so that you can flourish as a lake association.
Yeah, I love the idea of just having a focus and making sure you know what that focus is, building consensus amongst both the board as well as the members or donors or taxpayers in the case of lake districts, trying to form that sense of we're all on the same page. When I think about our capacity framework that Sarah and I have been sharing with people, it's like that's part of that base, making sure the community understands everything. And then budgeting, as wonky as it is, that's in that middle part of our pyramid where it's like, this is your internal functions. You have to be able to develop a budget and check on your budget. And then ultimately you're doing those things for those programmatic kind of capabilities to be able to say, we restored X miles of stream, or we prevented X thousand carp from getting back into the wetlands. Those are the things we're all working towards, but you got to have that base underneath it.
And
Absolutely.
some of those, that tip, we should have put the pyramid here, just to revisit it. But that the top of the programmatic piece, it might not always be right trying to correct a wrong or fix an issue. It may be protection, or protecting something that's already good, protecting it for future generations. So don't always think about maybe, okay, what's wrong? What do we need to fix? But what do we maybe want to protect now before something, before there is an issue. So good to think about what you want your programmatic piece to be when it comes to your capacity.
And it does sound like, Stephanie, one of your lessons was, yes, you can do the pillar approach, but kind of be cautious about whether that's committing you to those segregated accounts, so that if you're fine with that, that's okay. But sounds like you evolved into sort of a post-segregated account world, but it was predicated on results and trust, that people saw what you were doing and they're like, I don't have fear that they're going to misallocate these resources, right?
Right. So now if you go to our event, we don't have the pillar project auction. We do a good job demonstrating our work, or maybe telling about the types of work we want to make possible. But now we have just kind of a raise, it's our greatest need. So it's giving us those unrestricted dollars But if we had done that the first year, I don't think that it would have worked, because to your point, people needed to trust us that we would do what we promised that we would. And so that's been a helpful shift. But you do have to, this is about accountability. And a big part about accountability is financial accountability as a lake association and a nonprofit organization.
And I know we want to wrap this up in the next couple minutes, but you did mention an annual report that you have. How else do you share your successes throughout the year? Just real quick so people can see, like, kind of check in on what you're doing and how you're doing.
Yeah, so many different ways, through our social media accounts, through our emailed newsletters, through press releases, through our annual meeting, are a couple of quick ways that we can communicate that progress.
Good, thank you.
Awesome. Well, we did want to try to serve up some tools too that relate to this conversation. If you're working with a lake association in particular, you might not recognize this, but you're part of a huge constellation of thousands and thousands of nonprofits, and they're all trying to solve problems, and they're all tackling, I think, some of these similar questions around, hey, are we really focusing on our purpose? So there are some great resources out there. The National Council on Nonprofits has a webpage with a bunch of different budgeting tools, and I'm not talking about spreadsheets or accounting software. These are more like checklists and exercises that any lake association can be going through just to kind of be a little more introspective and think about where they're headed. Related to what we talked about earlier, kind of a board matrix and knowing where your gaps are in your board. We still have those tools available on our website in the capacity corner. And then we also share the People of the Lakes guide, sort of your introductory guide to getting started with lake associations and lake districts. And also resources related to budget for lake districts as well. So bear in mind, lake districts are a little bit different, but not that different, because again, you need to build that trust, and you're going to be making an ask to your voters about whether or not they support what the board is putting forward. The People of Lakes guide still has this budget that you can see on the next slide, just sort of a roughed out, example lake district budget, and it's not a whole lot of money. If you look at it, it's grown from 28,000 to 41,000. These numbers might be a little bit off due to inflation, yet this is still a really nice, simple framework for any lake district to be thinking about in terms of managing their budget. And you can see, like Clean Boats, Clean Waters, they're doing their aquatic invasive species prevention. You can see harvesting expenses. They're managing probably Eurasian water milfoil. Those are places where you call out, hey, we're matching what we do to what we said we were going to do, or to what we set out to accomplish. On the next slide, just a couple of other comments. The annual report that we talked about with Stephanie, that's one way that a lake association shares out what they're doing. Lake districts are required to have somebody, it doesn't say who, but somebody has to look back at your spending over the previous year and present an audit to the annual meeting. There's not a lot of definition about what that is, but someone needs to look at it and say, okay, you said you'd spend this much money on the Clean Boat, Clean Waters and on the aquatic plant harvesting. Here's what you actually spent. And that informs, obviously, your budget going into the future. It's always, I think, looking a little bit backward that we look forward. And sometimes you have to look over a longer time period. This image here is something that we shared with readers of our newsletter, where we tried to capture, like, what is going on with the cost of printing and mailing our newsletter itself. And it was starting to get expensive due to postage and paper costs. And we had to sit back and say, well, wait a minute, is this sustainable? Is this part of what we're going to do? Or can we pivot to fewer editions per year and then start using email more effectively? So that's the kind of thing you might be able to see if you look at a longer time frame. Doesn't get into, again, like what accounting software you're using, but it's really about how do you conceptualize budgets and spending.
One thing I wanted to point out, Eric, is that it's not always about where we overspending, but we've had years where we've underspent on something. So we started the year, budgets can be hard because it's a point in time. And for some projects, they're just fuzzier at the beginning of the year, if you're and so you don't always know if you're going to be able to pull off that project. But I would offer that when you look back on what did we budget and what did we actually spend, don't just look at where did we overspend, but also take a moment to say, where did we underspend? And are we consistently underspending on something? And then why? What's getting in the way of us being able to do that work? Are there some larger questions that we need to figure out? Even for us, yeah, there is a lot of, oh shoot, we wanted to do that, but we couldn't. And then we need to figure out as an organization how we can solve those problems, because our job as a nonprofit organization is to make an impact and spend dollars to get the work done. So you don't want that money to just be sitting in the bank, not supporting your mission.
Yeah, good points. And I think you also make a point that your board, kind of at their regular meetings, are looking at your finances and they have a picture of what's happening, because it's all put into numbers. It's put into tables and it shows, here's what we budgeted, here's what we spent. And I think you mentioned, like, you don't need to, as a board, go into every single expense line, but maybe there's things that someone calls out and says, hey, this is weird, like we budgeted this much, but we're not spending anywhere near that. What's going on? So in your role as a director, you get to talk to them and explain like what's going on there and probably work out a solution, or at least a plan going forward.
Exactly. And our treasurer has a really important role in that as well. So any treasurers on lake associations or lake districts, really communicating to the board, I'm an independent person and I'm calling, here's some red flags, or here's some things that look fishy, but I looked into it and here's what I found, is an important accountability tool.
And to me, that's a great segue to the next episode that we plan to present to people, which is just kind of diving into sort of what do financial reports maybe look like. I know this is going to sound really boring for some people, but hopefully today's episode sort of sets you up to be like, well, this isn't boring. This is how you see evidence of efficacy, how you find out that your group is really doing what they set out to do, is to kind of be able to look at some of those numbers and be literate in terms of the group's finances. So we're going to take a look at that and some of the tools that might help you organize finances as well. I guess I want to thank Stephanie for sharing her time with us.
My pleasure.
Yes,
And
thank you, Stephanie. And we also want to encourage everyone listening or watching to visit our YouTube channel, which is where you're watching this video, but also to click on the link to our feedback form and tell us what you think about these. Are they helpful? Are they useful? And what future episodes or ideas would you like us to share in the coming months? So thank you for your time, and we hope to see you soon.
thank you.